message today was inspired by a television program I saw last week on PBS, Wednesday night, a program called Genius, hosted by Stephen Hawking. I see some head nodding. Some of you saw it. Well, in episode 2, the question that he poses to his volunteers is this: is there life on other planets? And he's taken 3 ordinary people who have no scientific background, and he's teaching them to think like geniuses. So the first thing he has them do when they're contemplating this big question, is there life on other planets, is get a mental equivalent of how many stars there are in the Milky Way galaxy. So he starts with the premise that 1 grain of sand is equal to the sun. And then they begin piling up sand to represent how many stars are in the solar system. And they pile, and they dig, and they weigh. And pretty soon they're exhausted, and they realize they haven't even made a dent in it. So they call in a couple of backhoes to dump 500 tons of sand to represent the number of stars in our solar system alone. About 300 billion stars. Now, I know, if you're like me, you can't even comprehend that. I mean, it's a lot of zeros to me, and I know it's big. That's about as far as I can get with it. But this pile of sand was enormous. And so they began looking at, okay, if there are 300 billion stars in the solar system alone, how many of those planets could support life? How many of those have planets that could support life? And so we cut back to Stephen Hawking, and he's telling us that scientists have determined a zone around any star, and it's the zone where it's not so hot as to burn up and not so cold as to freeze and have water. So the scientists have determined that they call this the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold. And in every sun has a Goldilocks zone. So they're looking at probably 50 billion planets in the Milky Way galaxy that could support life. Now, if you're like me growing up, the idea was ludicrous. You know, life on other planets, that's nuts. Well, now it's almost crazy to think that there wouldn't be, right? That's some pretty big odds to have life on other planets. So what this did for me was it really made me start thinking. Oh, well, I didn't give you the third part. The third part is this. So there are 50 billion planets that could support life. Then we cut to the desert where there's a giant SETI listening station. And Stephen Hawking tells us about, we have been listening to the universe for the last 30 years and haven't heard a peep. That they've found a sweet spot frequency in the spectrum of radio waves that is quiet. You can't hear all the space noise, and it would be logical to think that developed intelligence on another planet would be intelligent enough to find this frequency, dial in it, and say, hello, is anybody out there? But they've never heard anything. So, what came out of this program was what we have here on this planet in the form of the human race is incredibly precious and incredibly rare. To the very best of our knowledge, we are the jewel of consciousness in the Milky Way galaxy. You know, when I was growing up, there was this kind of angst. We're so alone and lonely in the big old void of space. And it made us feel small and little. But now I'm thinking, wow, what if we are the gem of consciousness? What if we are the point of consciousness as it has developed to the furthest reaches it can get at this time. In the Milky Way, I'm not talking about the whole universe because that's too big to contemplate. But right here, right now, we represent the outpost of consciousness. Can you get what I'm saying there? We are, you are, I am an outpost of consciousness itself. That's pretty impressive to me. And it also makes me gulp a little bit because it sounds like I might have a pretty big job to do in the world. Develop my own awareness about life and all that we are becoming. That seems to be where I'm going with this job of being human. So don't worry, I'm not going to go off in a tangent about UFO sightings in Area 51 or anything like that. I'm going to focus on the question of, why are we here? Why are we here? Why do we exist? With 50 billion possible Earths, and it may be that we are it. We are the outposts. We are the farthest reaches. Andrew Cohen, who is the author of a wonderful book called Evolutionary Enlightenment, he writes this. When we think about life, we usually mean my life, a few decades of personal history, a particular circle of family and friends with a certain culture. We don't think of a 14 billion year process of evolution, of evolutionary development that burst out of nothing and became the entire cosmos. But that's life. And the experience you are having in this moment as you are breathing in and breathing out is all a part of life in the biggest sense, part of one inconceivable, vast, integrated process. The life I'm speaking about is something that came from nothing, and that is what you are and what I am. That which burst into being 14 billion years ago has become you. So what I'm talking about today is contrasting the idea when I was growing up, it was believed that the universe had no beginning and had no end. And then lo and behold, scientists, astronomers were able to capture pictures of a microwave field that is the afterglow of the very first thing that ever happened. They can actually see the light left over from what we call the Big Bang. It was probably more of a big whisper, but it was a flaring forth. And so in spiritual terms, we can look at that flaring forth as the awakening of consciousness. There are physicists now who agree with the spiritual community that consciousness is the ground of all being. So the awakening of consciousness happened 13.8 billion years ago. And you were there. I was there. Oh no, certainly not dressed in this wonderful outfit, but there in a very real sense, because everything that was needed to build the universe was poured forth in that nanosecond. Everything. And light began being particles, and particles began searching one another out and coming together and breaking apart, and coming together again and breaking apart. And thus began an 13.8 billion year evolution of form matched with consciousness. So what I'm saying to you today is that everything that's ever gone on, the evolution of you has taken part over that vast time-space continuum. So this microwave field that they can see it in every direction, which means that we are living in a sphere that started with nothing. This is mind-bending to me. Science is to me the new spirituality as we meld this idea of consciousness and scientific discoveries. So we go back to that very first moment and bam, it came into being and it was very, very hot, so hot, millions and millions of degrees, that half of it burned off and then off it went in this expanding space to become the universe that we know of. So that dance of particles coming together and breaking apart is still going on, as we see all the time in the world. It's coming together, forming and unforming, forming and unforming. Dr. Ernest Holmes tells us in his book, Creative Thought, that the spirit creates by becoming the thing that it thinks. There is no other possible way in which it could work. So that means that you and I, our spirit, thinking into form, you. You are an idea that began before that first flaring forth ever took place. When you were still in the land of all possibility, before possibility had poured into probability and becoming. So I wonder if the idea of who I am is still there and somehow still affecting my life as I move forward in time. There was a big idea back then. What's the big idea now? And can I tap into it? Can I use that divine idea to help me live the life that I have come here to be, to do what I have come here to do? The story of the beginning of you and me. Our lives are the part of the evolutionary life of the evolution of life itself. There at the beginning, as spirit went about its work of imagining black holes and giant clouds of gases that collapsed into planets and the whole thing, a part of us must have been there because we are not created out of nothing. Well, we are created out of nothing, but since that first moment, we've been created out of the substance, the body of God itself. And so we travel together. Let's keep going. Let's keep going on this. We're out, the planets are collapsing and stars are exploding and the dust is finding its way into the making of planets. And your body and my body come from the very dirt of the earth. The elements are all there that have come together to form this. And that giant electrified soup of the oceans that then began creating that very first life form that was able to say, ooh, I have edges. I can feel when I bump up against something. That's the first glimpse of awareness of the unique self. And then those little one-cell organisms began to specialize and do different jobs and build until multi-celled creatures came to be. And the time that passed in this was like billions of years until finally about 3 million years ago, the first humans came to be. And this was the first creature that could stand up and say, wow, I exist. I'm here. Why do I exist? And since then, we know the story. We know the story of the coming together of civilizations and the putting together of philosophies and science and all of the things that we've done in the quest for the answer to that. Why do I exist? And the conclusion that I have to come to is that I exist to be the divine consciousness at the very farthest reaches of its development. That's quite a responsibility. Although Spirit doesn't care really what I do, it cares that I do. So my job is to choose what direction I do. I know that I can choose towards something that is life enhancing, and I know I can choose towards something that is not life enhancing. And so maybe my job is that simple. As awareness continues exploring the world and exploring life as me, maybe it's that simple. Just to come up against experience and choose forward in the name of evolving consciousness. In the workshop later this afternoon, I'm going to talk about a technique called visioning, which is a way to really tap into that fundamental idea that has come forth as you, as me. It's a spiritual practice, just like meditation and prayer. It's a way of learning to allow that creative evolutionary urge to act for us in our lives and to make the path smoother. So you're welcome to join me this afternoon. So here we are. Here we are. Say my premise is right, and I am here to represent the divine nature of spirit as consciousness at its most fully developed form. Then I can no longer ask the question, why do I exist? I have to change the question. And the question then becomes, what am I creating for my life and for the world? That's a better question now. What am I creating? So when we come back from the stars and when we come back from thinking about the Big Bang and the evolution of consciousness, and we're sitting in a car in traffic trying to make a left turn and somebody's honking at us, what if we ask the question, what am I creating for my life and for the world? And let that determine what our reaction is, what our next move is. What if the next time I'm in the grocery store and the clerk is crabby with me, what if instead of reacting and getting huffed up, what if instead I say, what am I creating for my life and for the world here? And I instead choose to look that person in the eye and see and recognize that person as the most highly developed outpost of consciousness that she can be, he can be. You know what that does? It up-levels all of us. When consciousness recognizes consciousness, both are uplifted. And that's, I think, our work in the world. To recognize each other as who we truly are. This divine flame of intelligence and love and joy and power working abundantly in the world. So what do I want you to leave with today? I want you to leave first with a bigger idea of who you are. Just toy with that idea that maybe you are an idea in the mind of God whose time has come. So that when we begin looking at each other again, it's with new eyes. Secondly, when you find yourself in a difficult situation, I'd love you to be able to stop and ask, what am I creating for my life and for the world? And let that be the determining factor in what our next moves are. And finally, I hope that you will ask this of yourself and ask it often. What is the highest spiritual idea for my life? Because something happens when we do that. We engage with the energetic, creative, evolutionary force of the divine. and it moves forward before us and makes the way smooth. So I'm going to leave you with one last idea from Ernest Holmes, a quote that says, "We are the chemists in the laboratory of the infinite. What shall we produce?" So let's take that into prayer, shall we? We do the 5 steps of treatment, as Reverend Lee has taught you. First, by recognizing what it is I know about God, what I believe about God, what I know that I know that I know. What I know is that God is good because I choose good. I know that God is power and everywhere present and all-knowing and filled with joy, filled with harmony, and works with abundance in all things. And so if God is all there is, then that must mean me too. I must be a part of it because there's nowhere else to be. I accept that. I accept that all of those qualities of God reside in me and await my recognition and tapping into. And so I do that now. I allow my life to be filled with joy and harmony and abundance and peace and creativity. And from this point, and I ask each of you to use my prayer from your own perspective. Imagine that you are saying these words to yourself. I claim for my life greater abundance, greater joy, greater creativity, greater aliveness, and greater evolution of the truth of who I am in the world. I claim that my life on this planet serves others as a light in the darkness for a world that still thinks it's dark. I let my love spread and shine across the world. And I know that what I do in this moment is express spirit, express God. And I'm so grateful for this knowing. I am so grateful. I release this treatment into the law of God, and I let it go. And if you would say with me, and so it is.
I want to thank you for joining us today. I am so grateful that you took your time to watch or listen to this message. If you found this message beneficial, I would ask you to go to our website. Once there, click on the Contribute button and experience the joy of conscious and purposeful giving. It is through your gifts that we are able to bring this message to the world. I would also ask you to please share this message with anyone you feel might benefit. Again, I want to thank you for joining me and the Agape community as together we bring joy to life.